the loss of memory, the bad decision making, the impulsivity, it's common across the board. But with a TBI, you exhibit all those things. But a TBI does not necessarily mean a CTE. But reverse it, a CTE stems from a TBI.
TBI, yeah, absolutely.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Phineas Gage was a railroad worker in the 1860s when a large iron rod exploded passing through his head. The rod destroyed the left frontal lobe, and those who knew him prior to the accident were quoted as saying, "Our friend Gage is no longer here." The trauma to his brain changed his personality from a congenial man to exhibiting every bad behavior that a human being can have. Over time, Gage's bad behavior began to fade, and more of his old self began to reemerge. The neural pathways inside his head began their own repair and rewiring. His mere survival should have been testament enough to write him into the history books, but his personality repair is where the story of hope resides. The human body is a remarkable organism. Its ability to take trauma day after day and continue to function is nothing short of miraculous. Where other species would have lost their will to live, humans will instinctually fight until their last breath and return to who they truly are. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back one of our nearest and dearest friends, that's Mike DePalma, to talk about the suffering of a traumatic brain injury.
He's got to have the most appearances on this.
Oh, he's up there. He's like Saturday Night Live used to do like the Six Timers Club with like Tom Hanks, Steve Martin. That's going to be the DePalma thing.
No, when we can't get anybody else, we just get DePalma.
But you know what? So it's really an amazing thing to watch you coming back. Even in the short time that I've known you, to watch you regenerate and come back, it's one of my favorite stories to tell.
Yeah, well, I've known him for 26 years, and there ain't no comeback there. He's still got bullets from, and we won't go.
I appreciate it. You know, by you saying that, I actually noticed myself, like, you know, the resilience and I've gotten better and better and better since that, you know, first episode.
Well, you're building up that speed bump before you have that impulsivity, which we're going to talk about. Before we get into anything, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust Toyota of Hackensack. So if you're looking for a car, to go to toyotaofhackensack.com. Now, the hurricane is in the house.
We don't have to tell us a little about yourself.
No,
we know too much about him already.
I got some other stuff I can talk about.
You always got something in the back pocket. Which brings us to our social media question. And I pulled this one. It was one that happened that was sent in a long time ago. But tonight, I had to ask this to you. It comes from Schultze. It says, what was the hardest punch you've ever taken? Mike, you're our guest. Let's defer to you.
Okay. I'd have to say I used to train for, you know, actually I used to train, you know, boxing. I've done that for a while. And I was training for a charity event. And one of the cops in my department, you know, he was, you know, martial arts. He was a bigger guy, nicest guy in the world. And he's like, listen, why don't you come down to my dojo and, you know, we'll do some sparring. So I was like, okay, you know. And in my eyes, yeah, you know, he was a senior guy. So I was still, you know, a police officer. He always had that respect. And, you know, I started going at him, you know. And I was a little bit bigger, and he was a little bit bigger than me. And I hit him with a few shots, and I'm like, oh, you know, I was like, oh, you know, I was like, oh, you know, whatever. And he just unleashed on me. He hit me left, right. I was actually, wow. And then he hit me with an uppercut, and that pretty much rocked me. Yeah, I was surprised I didn't go down. You know, I don't know if that was a gift or not, but I was
in the ring. You ever been knocked down?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the I don't know. Did you ever box, Mike?
No.
So
I got knocked out in football games, though.
So when you get knocked down in the boxing ring, it's the oddest thing because I never lost consciousness.
Right.
But I got knocked down. I got knocked out, and it felt like I was up against a wall. It looked like I was just leaning. It felt like I was just leaning up against a wall, but I was on my side. Yeah. I go, what happened? Where'd this wall come from? And it was the floor.
Yeah. I mean, I got knocked down, but his shot, like it went through me.
Yeah, when you come across those people that really know how to throw a punch and snap it.
Yeah, it was like boom, boom, and I was like, whoa. And I remember going to my buddy's house. I was like, wow, I think I'm a little punch drunk or something. You know, I didn't know the term to describe it, but I was definitely dizzy.
When I was training, my trainer took me down to Red Brick in Harrison, and an older pro, was looking for sparring partner, heavyweight sparring partners. So I thought I was Mr. Big Shit. I go there, and I learned in about the first 20 seconds what the difference between me and a pro is. Like just the amount of times I got hit. I look like a bloody mess. Mike, what do you think?
It's actually a pretty funny story. You know, back in the day, when my father owned a heavy metal club, I used to do security for heavy metal bands, and, you know, we were constantly going at it with people. My father calls me up on weekends and says, listen, guy gave me tickets to a Rod Stewart concert. Do you want to go?
Big
Why
massive
not?
brawl at a Rod Stewart concert.
Why not? I grab a friend of mine. We go over to Rod Stewart concert over to Meadowlands Arena. Now, we park over in Giant Stadium, and you had to walk across that, you know, the walkway going up. It was like a bottleneck.
Oh, the Continental Airlines?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys start pushing through the crowd and pushing through the crowd. My friend's like, they ain't getting past us. So the guy goes to push past us. My friend shoulder bumps him. They start going at it. His friend came from out of nowhere, from behind me, punched me right in the eye. I wound up getting 4 stitches over my eye. But when I got hit, it was like the old, like cartoons, where you see like stars,
Yeah.
you know, and there were little swirly things going up. I couldn't see. I don't know, to this day, I don't know if I got knocked down. I don't know. All I remember is saying, like, I thought my friend hit me. I'm like, you hit the wrong guy.
You work security long enough, and you will definitely get punched by one of your own guys. It happens all the time.
Never saw it coming, nothing. The guy punched me right in the eye. I had blood coming down my face. I wound up getting like 5 stitches over my eye. Hardest punch I ever took was at a Rod Stewart concert.
All right.
I've seen Metallica. I've seen Anthrax, Overkill. I've seen Slayer. I've seen Iron Maiden. I worked all the shows. Never got punched in the face. Go to a Rod Stewart concert. Get knocked right in the fucking eye.
Should see the fights that happen at an Elton John concert.
A guy comes up to me the next day. Now my eye is up like this. I got stitches over my eye. I won't keep. You know, I take the bandage off it. And the guy goes, "I'd like to see the other guys." Yeah, I wish I saw him too.
The hardest punch I ever took was from a professional hockey player. Years ago, when I was still in college, I was bouncing at a bar, and one of the local hockey guys, he had retired, but he was a big guy, and he was the captain of the NHL hockey team, and he had just lost his wife to cancer, and he was boozing. He was just boozing, and people would come up and bother him. This particular night, he brings 2 active hockey players, 2 pretty big names, and he's drinking, and the head bouncer comes up to us and says, "Keep an eye on him. He's getting ready to throw some people." So me and my college roommate, who was bigger than me, and he was a big guy, we're coming up with a plan, like, how are we going to do this? I don't want to get punched, but I got to keep him from killing somebody. Sure enough, it happens. Somebody gets on him. The plan was I was going to jump on his back and hold him, just to keep him from swinging. So I do that, and one of the other hockey players thought I was attacking him, and he punched me. I actually still got a scar right here. Punched me right here so hard that I couldn't hear. Like, I couldn't hear. It must have been the knock on my skull or whatever. After he found out that he punched the wrong person, I got a real nice apology from an NHL hockey player. Schultze, thank you so much for sending that one in. That's an interesting question. It's a fun question. But it kind of leads us into our discussion tonight on traumatic brain injuries. And just to illustrate our point, Drew, you want to bring up that picture I sent you so we can give a little backdrop?
There we go.
Why are you always like that?
Oh, okay. All right.
Move your bottle.
Do not use his brain.
Wait, who did
Abby
this? I
Normal.
like.
Little Marty Feldman.
Young Frankenstein.
That's right.
It's actually brain. It's.
But that's actually your brain scan,
yeah.
correct?
It's brain mapping. Yeah.
Yeah, that's your brain mapping, which you sent me. And, of course, when you send me anything, I always turn it into something
Of course,
interesting.
Of course.
The smoke coming out from the top of your heads. But
I do like this stuff. I really do.
But we're going to use that as a backdrop.
We're going to go through step by step. Okay, Mike. So,
because you, my friend, have been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury.
Correct.
As you know, Mike was, as all of our audience knows, Mike was a captain in the Army, or as you would say, the Army.
The Army.
The Army.
I was.
And it's sort of taking you into an interesting path. For the opening, I talk about Phineas Gage, and I told you a little bit about him on the phone. Phineas Gage was a railroad worker in the 1860s, and one of the tamping rods that they used to tamp the dynamite with, as he tamped it in, it went through here. There's pictures of the guy. He went through here and came out the top of his head. And before the incident, he was a calm guy, congenial guy, family man, very upstanding man. After that happened, because of the damage to his frontal lobe, he became a womanizer, a drinker, a gambler. Every bad behavior that a human being can exhibit, he had it. And it really changed his personality. But the funny thing about Phineas Gage is over time, that old self started to return. So the brain does repair itself over time. Never going back, obviously.
I don't know if we got enough time for Mike's brain to
Re-engage. I can definitely, I agree with that, and I think that's what happened. In my case, it's retraining itself. I'm much better, basically. Through therapy. So forth and so on.
Well, how was a traumatic brain injury described to you when you first heard it? Like, I don't even know when the first time I heard TBI.
This goes back to what we were just talking about. Number one, I don't know. I was affected, because of something happened in war. But these professional athletes, boxers
With the CTEs,
Well,
right?
that's what I said.
I don't know how in the world that they could, overcome something like that. Like, I mean, that's consistent and constant blows. I mean, mine.
Can TBI be incident specific or could be cumulative?
It's cumulative. So the study, and just to give a shout out to the study that I read, it's a pilot study of brain injury in police officers, a source of mental health problems. And in there, they talk about the constant concussive and subconcussive incidents. And in sports, it's real simple. You play football. You have a 30-year football career. If say you go to the NFL with junior football and on up. Those constant hits, those subconcussive hits, are just cumulative over time, and they damage and detach your frontal lobe. But one of the things interesting in that study they talked about is there's a brain institute in Boston where they keep all these, where they do the CTE studies, because CTEs, anybody with a TBI has a likelihood of getting a CTE, which is degenerative. So they check these brains, and you can't check them while they're alive. They can only check them post-mortem, and they brought up two people. Well, actually three people. First person was Aaron Hernandez. So Aaron Hernandez killed himself when he was 27 years old. Obviously did some really bad things, but they'd never seen a brain more damaged than Aaron Hernandez at 27. Never. Junior Seau was the second one. Shot himself in the chest. Funny thing with Junior Seau is he knew enough that he wanted his brain to be studied post-mortem, so he shot himself in the chest. Which is a ballsy move.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a ballsy. You must.
If you miss, you got a big hole in your chest and you're still alive.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about that. It's pretty interesting.
And the third one was interesting. So it was Frank Gifford. So when Frank Gifford died, he donated his brain to this place in Boston, and turns out he had CTE, and all the different. The loss of memory, the bad decision making, the impulsivity, it's common across the board. But with a TBI, you exhibit all those things. But a TBI does not necessarily mean a CTE. But reverse it, a CTE stems from a TBI.
TBI, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your particular, is there one particular incident when you were in war that sort of?
Yeah, it was It was one specific day. We actually on base, and I had to go to the bathroom. Normally you'd have to wear all your gear, sleeping on base, whatever it is, because of mortar attacks.
Where is this now?
This is Camp Stryker. This is like outsourced from different areas.
In what country?
Iraq.
In Iraq.
Yeah. So It was a strange, we just came off of, a mission, and I obviously you lack sleep. I don't, any veteran or even police, anybody could tell you, when you're in that state of mind. So it was a real strange, I had to go to the bathroom, but it was
one or two.
No, it was just one.
Okay.
And there was something over when I was away. Something I think, I think my father always watched over me, and that specific day, when I was getting up, I was thinking about my father, something told me not to, just hold on, wait. I mean, it was like a matter of like seconds. So I was like, nah, I gotta go, whatever. So I go, I had no gear on. And as I'm walking towards, I came out of my tent and walking towards the latrine, which was like pretty much like a trailer type. Everybody used it, whatever it is. And then as I'm walking, I was coming out of sleep, and I hear, I hear the whistling. And I was like, oh, I just said, holy shit. I was like, I turn around and I start running. So the round hit that trailer. And
Where you were going to be at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't be here. That specific thing, me stopping and thinking. So the concussive blast, as I was running, blew me into like the barrier.
Oh, you were like, it was like a movie.
Yeah, kind of.
Like those explosions in the movies.
Yeah. So, and then I literally, the barrier, I hit it. My head hit it. And it, it's just the impact. I remember, certain things like my, your teeth, like it just, so I went out, but somehow I managed to just get back up, and I kind of coordinated, a little defense or counterattack. And, I knew, and I had really, really close, one of my, he was a specialist, really good friend of mine. He's actually retired now, GBI agent. And, he said, Captain D, you got to rest, whatever. And, you don't really want to go to the medics or whatever, or get away from your soldiers, you know what I mean? So I like 2-3 days I was out, going through headaches and, nausea, so forth and so on. So
You would have the traditional concussion.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it blew me. I was surprised, afterwards you think about it, like how in the world did I just get up and have that ability to think quickly, And I think it's just,
Well, you think that's a survival mode thing?
I was going to say survival,
survival
but
mode.
like I knew there was other soldiers, there was other people, there was other, I knew that was there. So I knew subconsciously that I had to protect. And, it goes all the way back, not to get off the topic, but, I was always like that, even as a little kid, I always had that sense, to protect. And obviously careers that we went into. So, that was the first time, and that was some blow, It happened again while I was overseas, and it was, in a Humvee, and obviously, IED, and that blast, they rocked my head.
For our audience who's never been to war, explain the sensations, if you can, of especially the IED.
It just complete pounding. It's just shock.
Yeah.
It's a quick, I don't know.
Because the closest I've ever come to it is, I remember, you got to remember, I grew up in South Jersey. At one of the 4th of July parties, somebody threw a quarter stick of dynamite pretty close to me, and it went off. And I remember feeling the concussion, the percussion of it.
Well, it's a luckily it hit the back of the vehicle, so that the concussive, it's like power, it's the same thing as that, the mortar round hitting and the concuss, pulling you and push you. It's like a cinder block hitting your head, I guess.
Wow.
You touched on something before with like, never getting enough sleep and everything. Do you think sleep deprivation has something to do with like TBI?
I think it has my opinion. Again, this is, for everybody out there, this is strictly our opinions.
Yeah.
None of us are medical professionals, but I think it has a lot to do with
Although
your
I played a doctor on TV one time.
I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But I think it has a lot to do with your decision making, the lack of sleep.
Oh yeah,
and if your decision making is skewed, you may put yourself in a more dangerous situation because you're not looking at all the angles. I don't know.
Coming home, I was diagnosed with it, but deep down inside, you just don't, you
still feel the same,
right? You don't believe, like, TBI, like, yeah, okay, it's nothing visible. It's nothing. It's the same thing with post traumatic stress disorder, but both of those combined, it's deadly.
Well, mental health issues are the same thing. Any kind of mental health issue, you don't realize a change in yourself.
I can't
but
see.
Other people will see a change in you.
I can't see inside your skull. Thank God I can't see inside your skull.
I could just picture a bunch of monkeys jumping around in there, like hitting different buttons.
I think Nostradamus has been in there. I'm telling you, this is going to change life.
Not Nostradamus.
But if you think about the histories, this is just something recently. I think the first, what I read was the first diagnosed CTE was 1928, but they really didn't study it. Right? They didn't. As a matter of fact, that guy Phineas Gage is when they first started doing neurological studies on humans. So this is really recent, but we've been fighting wars in this country since we began. And think about all the soldiers coming home. We used to see it with the Vietnam soldiers.
Yeah.
Right? The Vietnam soldiers came home and they were always a little off. They were
Shell shock.
Yeah. The World War I, you've seen that video of the World War I guy in the trench, he's just shaking. He's just, and they used to call it the shell shock, and then it was battle fatigue, and then it was post-traumatic stress. But this has been going on forever. So we're actually kind of fortunate because I think with things like brain mapping and things like that, we're on the cusp of truly understanding what this does.